you. Hi, my name is Julia. I'm the co-vice president of MAUX, which stands for Mujeres Activas en Letras y Cambio Social. So first and foremost, thank you all for coming out today. Thank you to our elected officials for coming out today. We're going to start with conversation, very critical conversation and discussion about our past few months in Minneapolis and the federal occupation. So really important conversation. We hope you guys have takeaways from this, and we hope that you guys come to more MAUX events in the future. So thank you guys all for being here. And I'm going to introduce our lovely social media manager who put this all together. We've been calling her Big Sister General today. We love her. So this is Maya Boyd. So everyone give it up for Maya.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you to our co-sponsors, the Mutual Aid Collective, as well as the undergraduate student government. So thank you guys for being here today and joining us to host this very important panel on a very important issue. If I can have all the electives come sit up here, that would be great. Congresswoman, I'm going to have you sit here, Cedric here, and then Robin there. We'll have the AG sit on the end here.
This is so not friendly. Let me not block anything. Wow.
No adjustment.
No, there's none.
You have a mic. I will tell you what word you're speaking in. Sam Wamsley, you're going to start first. So I'll just give you this. It's red if it's not on.
You all can see me.
Okay. And also, I would like to thank all of the.
I'm just gonna hide under here if I can't answer this question.
Keep sinking down.
And I thank you all for your cooperation and flexibility. So thank you guys again for making this work, and thank you again to our electeds for being here today. But firstly, I'm just going to read an intro about each panelist while we're here. After I read the intro for each panelist, you're able to give a little bit more of an introduction about yourselves if you'd like to, and then briefly talk about Operation Metro Surge as well. And I will start with Councilmember Wansley because she is speaking first. But Councilmember Wansley has served on the Minneapolis City Council since 2021, and she has been a huge advocate for students in our ward, working with student renters through the identity crisis, advocating for a municipal grocery store, but also securing some new funding for streetlights in Babytown, just to name a few of her amazing accomplishments that she's done for students. And then I'll pass that over to you.
Okay, wait. All right. You all can see me. Great. I'm just going to stare. Represent Ward 2, which includes the University of Minnesota. So if you live along East Bank, even if you don't, I count you as honorary constituents. But I get a chance to serve our student and broader community on the Minneapolis City Council as the city's first Democratic Socialist and Black Independent Democratic Socialist City Council member. And as Maya mentioned, identity, you referenced identity crisis. And when I'm not advocating for student interests, we're taking on the Trump administration at the local level and getting his entire cabinet fired. Yay! So I will stop there. We're trying. We're trying. Okay.
I'm like, did I miss something?
Can we celebrate the small wins?
Yes, we can.
You realize as
Big
you
time.
go up in government, they become cynical and they don't never want to let you have the small wins. Really sad about that, Representative Frazier, but I'm going to pass it to my brother, Representative. Oh, sorry, Maya. Back to you, Maya.
Thank you so much, Robin. But all right, our next person that I will
Let me know when he accepts
Representative
this.
Frazier, so good guess, Robin. But all right, Representative Frazier has been serving in the Minnesota House of Representatives since 2021 as well. He's championed legislation such as Minnesota red flag laws and the restoration of voting rights for formerly incarcerated Minnesotans, among many other things. And Representative Frazier has been working really hard at the state level this legislative session to introduce legislation about the federal occupation. So I'll pass that along to Cedric to talk briefly more about yourself as well as what you've been doing.
All right.
Yeah, I'm giving Robin a hard time because I'm like, did I miss some news? And did we have more people resign or get fired? But good job on everything you're doing, and to everybody in here. Two so far. But everybody in here though, the two so far. It has been the actions of Minnesotans that made it happen, right? And yeah, clap for that. When Operation Metro Surge happened, one of the first things I said to folks when I was out in the community was that they picked the wrong state. That's right. They thought they were going to come here, roll us over. No one would care about our neighbors. We care about our neighbors. We stand up for our neighbors, and we exercise our First Amendment rights to show you how much we care about our neighbors. And it has been that pushback and that consistent pushback that has caused the problems that they're having, while they're having to fire people when people have to leave and be banished to somewhere else. So give yourselves a round of applause for pushing up and supporting your neighbors. As Maya said, I've been a state representative this will be my 6th year, my 3rd term. I did run during COVID, so that was a different time. But it was also the time that George Floyd was murdered. And I still remember watching that video like many of us probably did, and just the pain I felt, the horror that I felt, but also I understood then what that meant, the work that was ahead and what we had to do. The first thing was about making sure we had creating a system where we had accountability. So no matter who you are, you're not constitutional rights. To be accountability for that. That's much of what I worked on in my first 2 terms as a legislator, creating an accountability system for our local law enforcement where we could send complaints directly to the post board that licenses these local law enforcement. And what that means is, now, right? If you file a complaint, they can investigate that complaint. If they find that you have violated the ethics of that industry, they can remove that license. And for local law enforcement, like every other licensed person, that means you're taking off the field or taking off the streets and out of the community, so you don't get to continue to cause harm. We have that type of process for every licensed position in the state of Minnesota. And I know that very intimately because I represent our teachers when they go through licensure issues, and that is the way it works. If you violate that, there can be issues with your license. You don't get a chance to continue to do your job when you're causing harm. So that's a good thing. It creates a system that we can trust. It creates a system that also makes our community safer when we know there's accountability when people cause that harm. Right now, though, what the big things that we're working on in relation to and reaction to Metro Surge is we're trying to find a way to get resources to individuals that were harmed. That's involving accountability for those federal agents that were here that caused that harm. So I'm carrying legislation to get resources to our Bureau of Criminal Apprehensions to be able to look at all of the evidence that we're collecting now with the work of the Hennepin County Attorney and the Attorney General, who'll be here soon to talk about this. They're collecting evidence. We want to make sure that we have investigators that can look through and sift through all that evidence and then pass that on with recommendations of how we're going to charge individuals that cause harm in our state. And it's not just, it is tragic that they killed and shot 3 of our neighbors. But they've also violated Fourth Amendment rights, they violated First Amendment rights, and we need to make sure we hold them accountable for all of those things that they violated. There cannot be healing until we have accountability. And that is something we're working very hard on the legislature to make sure we create opportunities for that type of accountability so that we can get to that healing. Another thing we're working on is resources for our small businesses that have been harmed within the state by the occupation, and as well as work on resources for folks that were afraid to go to work, quite frankly, because they could just be snatched and sent off to another state or to another country, in most cases that they've never been to before. So we've got resources through legislation coming to provide resources for renters, and then we've got resources that we're working on to provide resources for our small businesses to make sure that we can keep them in place and keep them on our feet. The bottom line is diversity is one of the strongest strengths that we have here in the state of Minnesota, and we want to make sure that we don't have that strongly diminished because of the actions of an authoritarian regime in the federal in Washington, D.C. right now, which I know my sister's going to talk about a little bit more. I'll leave it there. Looking forward to the conversation. Thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you you for those remarks, Representative Frazier. And then now we're going to be talking about Congresswoman Omar. As many of you know, she's been serving in the House of Representatives in our 5th Congressional District since 2019. And she's made history as the first African refugee elected to Congress, as well as the first woman of color to represent Minnesota. She's also one of the 2 first Muslim women elected to the House. Representative Omar has been a strong advocate for student debt relief, immigration reform, fair wages, climate justice, and just overall advocating for more inclusive. And then I'll pass that along to you, Congresswoman.
Perfect time.
Thank you, Maya, and good evening or afternoon to all of you. It's always really great to be here in Ward 2 with Robin. I grew up in Ward 2. I raised my kids mostly in Ward 2. Yeah, it's just really good to be back here. What my brother Cedric forgot to mention is that he is an attorney. He's a defense attorney, and he is running for to be our next Hennepin County district attorney as well. And, you know, obviously it's always incredible to share a panel with my predecessor, mentor, my big brother, our Attorney General, the People's Attorney, Keith Ellison. Yes, it's good news that Minnesota, because of Minnesotans asking for accountability and pushing the federal government and the Trump administration, that we've seen the firing of Cristino. Yep. Yes. It is also because, like Cedric said, because of Minnesotans asking for accountability, pointing out the lack of transparency with the DOJ, that we are now seeing the ousting of Pam Bondi, which is really incredible. And it is because of Minnesotans that we have now Democrats, both in the House and in the Senate, saying we are not going to give a single dime to ICE or CPP until there is actual reform and accountability. And now that we have that partial shutdown, we are seeing Republicans finally realize that the Democrats are not going to break, that the Democrats are principled in making sure that, short of having that transparency, accountability, and the reforms that we need for our trust as Americans to be regained by this administration, that there is not going to be a single dime that will go to ICE or CPP. And so we will continue to push for that accountability, because it is our neighbors, Alex and Renee and Jose, that were murdered and shot. And it is upon all of us to make sure that, because they cannot seek accountability for themselves, or they can't seek it alone, it is up to us to collectively do that for them. Thank you.
Congresswoman. Now I will introduce our Attorney General. Attorney General Ellison has been serving as Minnesota's Attorney General since 2019. Prior to that, as Congresswoman Ilhan Omar mentioned, he was a member of the House of Representatives serving in Congressional District 5, and he was the first Muslim elected to the House. He's also successfully led the team that prosecuted Derek Chauvin, the officer that murdered George Floyd, and he's led numerous successful lawsuits such as insulin settlements, climate change litigation, and blocking unlawful federal funding cuts. So if you just want to give a brief intro about yourself and then briefly talk about what you've been doing, as given that recent lawsuit with the DOJ as well.
Yeah, let me. Should I stand?
Yeah, because we're short.
Yeah, we're all.
Except for Senator. But he's standing in solidarity, so I appreciate it.
So let me just assure everybody that while it's not appropriate for me as a prosecutor to say who I'm going to charge and who I'm not going to charge, that's all based on the investigation and what it yields, you can bet that we will be relentless in pursuit of accountability for the people who committed homicides involving Renee Good and Alex Preddick. Mm-hmm. It's simply not appropriate for a prosecutor to say, I'm going to charge them. No, we're going to complete the investigation, then we will decide. I can tell you now that there is evidence that exists that could support an indictment or a charge now. And you're thinking, well, why don't you just do it? Isn't that what you're thinking? Well, the reason why is that in the legal business, I used to be a criminal defense lawyer for many years. If a prosecutor charged a case out where I knew there was a bunch of other evidence that they did not bring forward, I would seize upon that and use that to try to get my client reasonable doubt. Does everybody follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
So what's better? A quick charge that gets dismissed or defeated, or a more methodical, well-researched, well-investigated charge that sticks? So that's really what I want to say to you. I want to say to you that it is the case that we all saw what we saw. The video shows what it shows, and I'm deeply disturbed by it. And we are taking our responsibility very seriously. I want to give Mary Moriarty a lot of credit because she is my office and her office are teamed up on this. We have an agreement to associate and work together to get to the bottom of it, okay? And we filed a lawsuit a few days ago, and it was civil in nature. And you all might be thinking, well, why would you, what's that about? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Where we sued the federal government and named Nome and Bondi as, defendants in a civil lawsuit. Y'all know what a civil lawsuit versus a criminal lawsuit? Who doesn't know what I'm talking about? I'm happy to explain. Civil is where you're getting either compensation or some sort of injunctive relief, and criminal is where somebody's going to get fined or maybe face the loss of liberty. This one is civil, and what we're saying is the federal government's decision to refuse to share with the state of Minnesota the investigative file is an arbitrary, capricious, irrational, and illegal thing to do, and that the court should order them to turn it over. And let me just tell you all this, because you may not know this. It is common, ordinary, and routine for federal and state authorities to work on criminal justice matters like gun running, gun trafficking, human trafficking, all kind of stuff we collaborate with them on all the time. During the Floyd case, and I'm glad that Ilhan mentioned that, we worked on the case together. There was no problem. And it was also under Trump. It was also a Republican appointed U.S. attorney, a woman named Erica McDonald. No problem. We worked together. But now they're like, no. Not only did they get up and say that Alex and Renee were terrorists, they said that they were innocent, and to which I say, well, you have obviously concluded all the work you plan on doing on the case. Therefore, they should hand over the file. You're done with it now, right? Right, good. Here, hand it over. But they're like, no. And what do they have? Well, like in the good case, they have the car, they have the gun, they have the shell casings, and they have statements. And we need all that stuff. And in the good case, they got the gun, they got shell casings, they have other material that is relevant to the determination of who did what, when, and why, and whether or not there's any liability or culpability associated with those actions. If their position is our people operated legally, you should know that there are legal reasons. I'm not saying they're moral reasons. I'm not saying they're justice reasons, but there are legal reasons that even a deadly use of force may be excused by law. You can debate whether that's right or wrong, but it is true. It's also true that if they have such reasons, they should assert those reasons and let a jury or a judge sort it out. We don't just have people killed by law enforcement in America and it's like, that's it, it's over, done, nothing to see here, move on. And that is essentially what Todd Blanche, who is functionally running the Department of Justice, has said right now. We're not even investigating. And by the way, 14 assistant U.S. attorneys quit their jobs. Think about this, quit their jobs because the Department of Justice from Washington said, oh yeah, you can investigate somebody, Renee Good's wife. You can investigate her. Wait a minute. We're gonna investigate Becca Good. Is that what we're gonna do? Yep, that's what you're gonna do. Well, we're not doing that, and they quit. So that is the state of that. And you should, a couple other quickie points. Tell me if I'm talking too long. I don't want to do that. Important for you to know that there is no legal barrier to holding federal agents accountable for committing state crimes. You follow what I'm saying? If you're a federal agent, say you're a federal fish and wildlife agent or a federal, doesn't matter. If you commit a crime, you're not legally excused. What happens is that you may assert a defense based on the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution, which says that as a federal officer, I was doing my job and I was doing what was necessary and proper to do my job, and that act of me doing what's necessary and proper is basically what they're saying in the state court is a crime. Therefore, if the court's convinced of that, or if you can get your case dismissed. But what if you're not doing what's necessary and proper? Imagine a scenario, and I'm using a hypothetical just for teaching purposes. Imagine that, the pizza's here. Imagine that somebody is a federal truck driver, transportation person, and they decide to drive 80 miles an hour in a 30 while they're drunk on alcohol. Now, they might be doing their job by driving that federal truck, but they're not doing what's necessary and proper to effectuate their job. So now they would not have that defense available to them. You follow what I'm saying? So is it necessary and proper to shoot somebody in the side of the head as they're driving by you? Judges and juries will decide that. Is it necessary and proper to disarm somebody and then shoot them 10 times? Other people than me will decide that. Well, ultimately we'll decide that. So we'll see. I don't know, maybe you have an opinion on this. So that's just a little bit about what I'm up to and what I'm doing. As Attorney General, we work mostly not on criminal matters. Mostly what we work on is consumer protection and a whole bunch of stuff like that. We work on defending the laws of the state of Minnesota. We work on representing state agencies. We represent on appellate matters. We do a lot of stuff, like a whole lot of stuff. And part of what we do is criminal prosecution in narrow circumstances, usually when the county invites us in or when the governor appoints us to do it. But we do a whole lot of other stuff, and I'd love to talk to y'all more about it in a minute.
All right, thank you so much, Attorney General Ellison. Our first question that I'll be asking you, or just all of you in general, is what actions, I know you briefly kind of discussed this, but what actions have been taken at the local, state, and federal levels to combat the illegality of this activity? Cedric, I know you briefly touched on the violations of the Fourth Amendment rights and things like that, but I would like to start with Sam Walmsley.
Yeah. So we've also joined in with lawsuits from St. Paul specifically in actually addressing Trump's infringement on our state sovereignty, and in terms of sending and deploying 3,000 ICE agents to overwhelm our cities and essentially impede on our day-to-day operations. We've joined on to that lawsuit. We know other cities have also been part as plaintiffs to that. And I think that is actually going to set a really strong legal precedence as other states and cities continue to be attacked, because Minneapolis wasn't the first and we won't be the last. But really making sure that states know that you don't have to retreat under the fears of the Insurrection Act. You should be asserting your rights to resist this administration. They're going to do everything that they can to politically intimidate you. We saw all those antics be played out here in Minnesota and Minneapolis. I mean, they literally even shared a ransom letter at some point through Kristi Noem that said, turn over your voting polls if you want us to go. So they were very blatant about what would be needed in a transactional matter, and that did not fall within their jurisdiction to essentially stop them from terrorizing and brutalizing our residents. So we want to show as a city that we're not going to stand for that, and also inspire other cities to step forward and say, no, we're going to be part of this legal resistance. And I think that is something under Attorney General Keith Ellison's leadership, like, we're really showing what it looks like to fight back using our legal tools in a form of resistance. Also legally at the local level, I think there's been a conversation too of what can we do legislatively to shore up support for our most vulnerable residents. And some of that has really honed in on the status of sanctuary city policies, or what we call as welcoming separation policies, which essentially relegate, your law enforcement agencies or your city departments. They should not be should be collaborating with other law enforcement agencies to do their jobs, especially when carrying out immigration affairs. So we found out actually in June 3rd of last year, because what I want to name, while we experienced the occupation for 3 months, I think it's very important to note that Trump likes to do tests before he does an all-out campaign. And we saw our tests here in Minneapolis and in St. Paul back in June 3rd to be exact, where we saw an immigration operation be carried out in the heart of one of our most predominant immigrant communities in East Lake Street. And in that, we saw tons of dismissal of ICE being there, even though there was badges, there were mass agents there who literally were part of carrying out an immigration operation. And we didn't see our city officials really show up in a meaningful way to talk about how we did not protect our residents and then protect those who called that out and showed up to support their neighbors who were being attacked by federal agents, and who were also sad to see our police department essentially do crowd control at the request of federal agents. So we had that test. There's something called policy ordinance was 20 years out of date. So in that, we took ourselves in to revamp that policy, to put in stronger protections, and we're doing that now, even going through the operation of looking at how do we ban mass agents from just carrying out, random kidnappings in our communities. Something else that I've been pushing our mayor to adopt is that we've seen through this occupation that residents most immediately call 911 when they're seeing masked or unmasked agents at their doors and they're not identifying themselves. So justifiably, they're calling 911 and saying, can you come and verify? And we've also seen other vigilantes essentially impersonate ICE agents. Or now we have this new thing, which actually, again, kudos to our Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty for advancing these charges. But now we have bounty hunters. They are also part of kidnapping people. And actually had an incident where my own city staff got guns pointed at them in front of City Hall by bounty hunters as they just, blew their whistles. So we have a hodgepodge of different groups that's carrying out this kidnapping and terrorizing of our residents or detaining of our residents. And we want in our police department to be part of verifying these things. If you see also ICE agents breaking our laws, like traffic laws, we saw many of them in St. Paul. They actually created a deadly crash that took the lives of 2 residents, I think, there. We should be enforcing our traffic laws. If they are parked in places they shouldn't be, called tow trucks. We should be seeing the enactment and enforcement of our laws and should not be giving ICE agents exemptions. So we've been looking at how to enforce that, how to strengthen our separation policies, but also knowing that it takes such a strong arm of the enforcement piece because they don't care about our policy. This is not a government of order or rule. So we've really been honing in on the enforcement piece. And also just working with regular people, because y'all actually have been the strongest enforcement arm, more than anything. I say we have not matched an ounce of courage and just the braveness of our residents in confronting these armed thugs who have militant weapons, and all you have to protect your neighbors is a whistle oftentimes and your phone. And we've seen our residents protect so many of our neighbors in the face of these thugs and actual domestic terrorists, just with those small items. So we've been working with residents, again, how to support patrols, how to alleviate some of the burdens on you all who are doing that enforcement piece. So that's a couple of things that we're doing on the legality, but again, doing that in coordination with a lot of these folks here because it's a team effort. And this is one of the things that I'm most proud of Minnesota and Minneapolis showing is like, how do you work across different agencies to show what that resistance looks like? Because there's a piece for all of us to hold in this. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Wansley. Next, I would like Representative Omar to answer.
Thank you so much, Robin. For us on the federal level, obviously, right after Alex Preddy was killed, it was really important for us to bring our colleagues here and to hold a congressional hearing here at the Capitol in St. Paul. Because what we were seeing was a lot of people just seeing the sound bites on what was on TV and not fully comprehending how horrendously difficult it was for Minnesotans to lead their daily lives amidst this federal law enforcement occupation. I would oftentimes find myself explaining to folks how, parents were organizing themselves in a neighborhood to try to drive other kids to school and back, how they would not go to work and just man the block and monitor how people were showing up at Wembley, how people were monitoring the number of flights that were leaving, how people were looking at heat-sensitive imaging to try to see, are they adults or are they children that are going on these flights? The shattering of our businesses, the vacancy of so many of our schools of children, and when Alex was murdered, it everybody was like, Elhan, we need to go and we need to be in Minneapolis, and so we brought in about 28 members of the House, organized in less than 3 days to have that hearing. The night before the hearing, they got an opportunity to hear from community leaders directly who were impacted by the ICE occupation. And then, the likes of our Attorney General, Keith Ellison, and others were able to testify. The police chief in Mendota Heights, talking about how it was even impeding to their work to have this federal law enforcement, and that really led to the Progressive Caucus then saying, we need to take a stance in coming up with some demands for our entire caucus to agree to. And I didn't think at the time that we would get the entire caucus to agree. I didn't even think that when the Progressive Caucus, I serve as the deputy chair of it, when we took the vote, I didn't think that the whole caucus would agree to these demands. And within an hour, we had like 99% of the caucus respond with an affirmative yes. And then, Hakeem and others on the leadership for the Dem caucus said yes. And I was surprised that then we got the senators with Schumer and everyone else on that side. And that kind of, I think, kick-started a lot of the congressional hearings that were then about Minnesota, that were about what really happened with Renee, what really happened with Alex, what happened with Jose and the other Venezuelan guys that were chased into that house in North Minneapolis. It created, I think, an opportunity for us to allow Minnesotans to speak through members of Congress, to ask the questions that we wanted an answers for, because many of these members did come in, many of them did absorb our stories, many of them were in the streets, many of them, even the Capitol Police guys that were driving them as they came in to provide security for the members, they were seeing the anger and frustrations Minnesotans had with ICE agents because they were confusing them with ICE agents. And they were then also expressing, right, like this is not the way we expect this level of vitriol can only come from a broken trust when it comes to law enforcement. And you saw the grilling, not just of Democratic members in the House and in the Senate, but even Republican members. You know, I like to remind people it was Senator Kennedy's questions that were the most, Senator Kennedy and Tillis's questions were the most damning questions when it came to Trump in firing Kristi Noem. And I don't think those kind of questions would have come out if they did not have colleagues that were sharing these stories with them, colleagues that were talking to them beyond the sound bites that you can only have in a 5-minute interview, which is what was sort of happening. And then we saw a slew of letters. We worked with Attorney General Keith Ellison to help myself, my colleague Congressman Ivey, and Congresswoman Chiapal to draft a letter to try to get in support of the lawsuit that he has to get all of the information that they need from the federal law enforcement to be able to do their own investigation, and for Hennepin County to also carry out their investigation. Then we were also able to get multiple pieces of legislation introduced. One, to get rid of the impunity that they have. Oftentimes I'm asked, how can a federal agent harm someone, damage their property, cause them disability, detain them unlawfully, and not have any damages that person can collect. And so a few of my colleagues, including Ayanna Pressley, are carrying legislation to make them vulnerable to having a liability the same way our local law enforcement has when they infringe on people's rights. We also have legislation to take the slush fund, the $75 billion ICE slush fund, and help support the communities like communities here in Minneapolis and throughout Minnesota, communities like Chicago and Illinois, be able to recoup a lot of the money that they were lost because of the federal law enforcement occupation. So those are some of the things that we've been working on. And again, obviously trying to make sure that we're not continuing to fund this rogue department has also been really important. The Republicans were really ho-gun in the House in saying we're not going to pass Department of Homeland Security legislation that helps fund TSA and our Coast Guard unless you fund ICE. We all voted against it. They sent it to the Senate, and the Senate this morning refused to take it up as a unanimous consent because we're all home, and there's always one unlucky person who has to rush back for those sessions. But it means that, for another possibly week and a half, the rest of the department will have people working without a pay. And I am really proud of the fact that we continue to take this principled stand as Democrats, and I will continue to lead that effort.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Next, I will ask the Attorney General's comments on that.
I'm sorry, what issue you want me to address?
Yeah, the question was, what actions have been being taken for you in the case kind of state, a little bit of federal, given that you're kind of going with the federal government to combat the illegal conduct? And I know you briefly.
Yeah, and by the way, protect and defend Minnesota. As Because you even heard Amy Coney Barrett and Roberts and even Clarence Thomas asked him a tough question on this issue of birthright citizenship.
He was in the room.
It's easy to miss him. He doesn't say that much. But my point is, we filed this case with the help of the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul against Operation Metro Surge. That case is ongoing. Case is not over. City of Minneapolis tabulated a bill of like $2.3 million as of like a month ago in terms of the losses imposed by the federal government. And other different institutions are counting up the bill. What's that?
300 million. Yep.
Yeah, they're counting up the bill every day because there were municipal losses, county losses, all kinds of. And what about small business losses? Yeah. You know, I love y'all. Whoever goes to Maya Cuisine up there on Central. Yeah. It's a great place, ain't it? Well, did you notice how for a few weeks it was closed? Yeah. Because their workers were afraid to come in, and their customers were afraid to come in, and I love that place too. Yeah. But see, and these are just regular folks making food people like particularly me and her for sure. But there were a lot of them like that. Yeah. Little pizza places, all kinds of damage to our small businesses, and so we're looking into the damages there as well. And let me just tell you all this. We've been talking a lot about something called the 10th Amendment. Mm-hmm. The 10th Amendment is kind of an important one. And what it basically says is that the states of the United States predate the United States as a political entity. And the states came into the United States based on certain agreements. And, there's the whole thing about the 3/5 clause and some other stuff. But one of the things the states said, look, we will enter the United States if we first of all enumerate and limit your power, and if everything else is known to be the state's province. If you get a law license, it's from the state of Minnesota. If you get a doctor license, it's from the state of Minnesota. You get a cosmetology license, state of Minnesota. If you can vote as a person who is under criminal supervision, as you can right now, it's because of the state you live in. You can do that in Minnesota, but you can't do that in Florida. It's because of the states. Most of American life is lived under state or municipal government. And so, but the federal government has a lot of power now because the things they run them, But they still cannot commandeer state prerogative. And that is pretty much what the thrust of our lawsuits have been over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And so what are we doing? Everything we can. We're protecting the rights of people who need gender-affirming care. We're protecting the rights of people who need National Institute of Health grants. We're protecting the rights of people who need student nutrition assistant programs, SNAP benefits. Mm-hmm. Ilhan and them were fighting like as hard as they could to protect people's SNAP benefits. And as with the shutdown came up, they said that they had the money and it was not going to discontinue service, but then they changed their mind, didn't they? So we had to sue them. Right now, we're suing them over everything from voting restrictions they want to impose, and we're working closely with the Secretary of State's office, Steve Simon's office, to protect our voting rights. And I will just tell you, we are in the middle of a full-on onslaught from the federal government, mm-hmm. which is something that is somewhat extraordinary and unique, mm-hmm. Now, I know that different pieces of this have tapped into different pieces of the American public, but all at once attack on a whole state, it's kind of you're living through a unique moment in American history. Mm-hmm. So, thank you all.
Thank you, Attorney General, and then I'll pass it on to Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Maya. I'll add a little bit. I mean, a lot has been said. A lot of great things are going on at the state, local, and the municipal level, and I appreciate all the work and working together. One of the things I tell people, and Robin mentioned this when she said things happened were starting to happen back in June, that test case. So when I'm not in the legislative session, I work with an organization called Education Minnesota, the labor union for our teachers. From that perspective, we were seeing very early on, the moment that Donald Trump was elected and then he did an executive order, and he said he was going to go on this mass immigration thing, we were seeing folks in those communities making decisions not to send their kids. And when I say those communities, I mean out in greater Minnesota and rural Minnesota. They were already making decisions not to send their kids to school because they were fearful of that. They were already making decisions, especially in the towns where we have a lot of manufacturing plants, not to go to work anymore, trying to figure out how they were going to navigate that. So we were, as a state, we were already starting to see these things happening in places, but Metro Surge put a real big spotlight on it because it was happening in more highly densely populated areas. And I tell that part of this because I want to set the tone. As we're talking about legislation to deal with the damages and harm that's been caused, a lot of what we hear from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is that, well, that's not a rural Minnesota thing. That's not a greater Minnesota thing. Those things didn't impact our communities. All you need to do was, if you would have just worked with them, nothing would have happened, right? But that's not true. Only 2 of my colleagues, who I've seen publicly, have made comments, and their comments have been specific to a couple things. One was to Representative Baker, and he's in the Wilmer area. He says, hey, this is impacting the businesses in my community. People aren't coming out to shop anymore. Workers aren't coming in to work anymore. We've got a problem. It's impacting our economy. And then there was Representative Rarick, when we had law enforcement come out and do a press conference, say, hey, not only are they discriminatory and profiling our lay people, our citizens, our residents, they're profiling cops. Yep. We have officers that are driving into work or leaving work when they're off duty, and they're pulling them over. They're putting guns in their faces, right? That was a bridge too far for them. So, but it then Representative Rarick said, we cannot have this. We cannot have agents harassing. Her district is where's Rarick? Buffalo. Wow. Buffalo. But she was speaking. It wasn't her Buffalo officers. Yeah. It was Brooklyn Park. That came out and made these and gave the information about this. But oftentimes it does take, though, for some of my colleagues on the other side, it has to happen specifically to them, someone they know, or someone that's tied to them from their community or from somewhere, right? And I'm okay with that. I mean, that's kind of a human thing. You have to experience it or know someone close to you to experience it. But the reality is, this has been an impact statewide on the entirety of Minnesota. At the legislature, we are working to address it statewide. The resources that we're trying to put in place for small businesses and also for folks that couldn't go to work to make sure they can keep their housing, it's not going to just be for the metro area. It's going to be for anybody who needs those resources that have been impacted because of what happened with Metro Serve. So we're working on that, and stay tuned because we're going to have some hearings coming up soon. I'm the co-chair of our Ways and Means Committee, so that focuses on the overall state budget. We're going to have some hearings coming up pretty soon, I believe on Monday the 13th, where we're going to have people come in and talk about the financial harm that has happened and tell those stories so that we can preserve that for the record and and show that it's not just the metro area, that it's happening all over the state. So we're going to have business from all over Minnesota come in and talk about that. We're going to have residents from all over Minnesota to come and talk about the impact that this has had on them, to put that on the record, and then work toward getting some resources for them. We also have legislation to ban law enforcement and federal agents from wearing masks when they're here doing this work and doing these operations. We don't allow our local law enforcement to wear masks when they're patrolling the community. There's no reason that these federal agents should be wearing masks when they're patrolling the community. What are you trying to hide? That's a question that I would ask. You should not, if you're doing your job and you're doing it according to the Constitution, there's nothing for you to hide. You shouldn't be able to wear a mask. We're also going to pass legislation to stop them from impersonating police officers. This actually goes back to something that's very personal to Democrats in the House. We lost Melissa Horton. She was murdered by someone impersonating a police officer. So we should not see pushback from our Republican colleagues on this, because this is something that you had a political assassination by someone impersonating a police officer. We're also working on legislation to ensure that we can codify in our state law the ability to sue these federal agents for personal damages. That was mentioned earlier, but that's something we're working to make sure that we have the opportunity to do that. We're also making sure you have to use a judicial warrant. Right now, they've been using these agency warrants, which means a federal agent, any agent, no matter what their rank and file is, can sign these agency warrants and say, this is my warrant to come and execute this. Those do not legally give you the ability to go into someone's property if they don't want you to come into there. That's why we've seen so many Fourth Amendment violations, because they're coming with these agency warrants administrative warrants, not signed by a judge, and saying, here's the warrant. What we've learned though, and this is where Minnesotans have been very good, we did a lot of know your right trainings. So people knew exactly what to look for. When they looked at those documents, they said, wait, it's not signed by a judge. This is not a judicial warrant. You can't come in here. That frustrated a lot of those agents. It turned a lot of them away, but it also saved a lot of people from being snatched up and sent somewhere that they had no idea where they were going without due process. We're also, someone mentioned, Wansley mentioned the bounty hunters that pulled the gun on somebody. I'm reviewing legislation right now to regulate bounty hunters. Bounty hunters are not really regulated in this state.
They're not?
There's no process. There's no license or process for them. They can just show up, dressed like police, looking like law enforcement, and do their thing. We're going to make sure that we can address that. And again, that shouldn't be controversial. We shouldn't want people showing up, pulling guns on people in the street indiscriminately and causing harm within our community. And lastly, one of the things we're working on is a limitation on how they use the facial recognition tools. Because what we've seen them doing is they're building a database here. And we heard these stories often where you see someone that was doing legal observation, trained to do so, not interfering, not violating the law. They would then show up to those individuals' homes the next day. They would track them down, show up to their homes to intimidate them. We want to prevent those things from happening. First of all, facial recognition is probably a problem anyway, just overall because what it's doing in the kind of surveillance database that they're building around the country. That's something we want to focus on here to prevent that from being used as a tool of intimidation in the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for those insightful answers. I'm going to answer one more question before we move to pizza. I know you guys are hungry, so we'll try and keep these answers a little bit brief for this one. But many communities are obviously going to suffer from the devastating effects that Operation Metro Surge has left. What is being done in government to help people with things like rental assistance, helping small businesses, among many other things? Firstly, I would like Representative Omar to answer that question.
On a federal level, like I said, we have introduced legislation to try to take the money that ICE have and refurbish it for use to support communities that have been devastated. But it's many.
Representative Omar, I don't think your mic is on.
My mic's not on. Okay.
Oh,
I didn't even know the thing went off.
there it is. There it is. There it is.
Okay. Is it on now?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Like I said earlier, we're trying to take the money that ICE has to refurbish it for usage in communities that have been devastated. Obviously, we're in the minority, so there isn't really anything that is moving on the House or in the Senate in regards to rental assistance or support for small businesses that have been devastated because of Metro Surge. I'm hoping, and I understand that there is obviously a challenge. It is not a budget cycle for the state legislature. It's a bonding cycle, and I know that they're trying their best to try to figure out how to maneuver the restrictions that they have. In trying to get some sort of funding bill. Those are not easy to pass when it is not a funding year. And I know that the city, as I've talked to them quite often, they're also challenged in what they have in their budget. And I've talked to the county too. They're all still struggling. So we're all trying to figure out, I think, from municipal to county to state to federal, realizing that our state has economically been devastated, and normally, when you have this kind of economic challenge, it doesn't come because of the hands of the federal government, and so it's hard for the federal government that has inflicted this pain to it's like asking your abuser to help you out. Yeah. So that's kind of the challenge that we have right now. I do feel confident as we are a majority in waiting. When we do take back the gavels, that we will use whatever leverage that we have to make sure that we are able to deliver actual resources back to states like ours that the federal government has economically devastated.
Thank you, Representative Omar. Next, I would like Councilmember Walmsley to answer.
Thank you.
It's still on.
All right, so on. Okay, so we're doing a number of things, and I want to say this is actually a really good case study of how we go out and destabilize other countries across the world. We lead with a militant force, and then usually we follow that with some level of economic blockages or repression. And we're seeing that be waged against the cities that the Trump administration is targeting. So they came in with the 3,000 federal ICE agents because of our collective resistance. We saw the drastic withdrawal of that, but now they're leading with these targeted economic blockades, through which I know our Attorney General is suing, and he named some of that, of just impeding the administration of federal grants that sustain a lot of our work, actually for you all, like your NIH funding that has taken hundreds of millions of dollars away from higher ed institutions like this. That then means your president Cunningham or that administration then passed the buck on to you all, and your senior tuition go up. So we're seeing, again, the economic repression phase. And we've already estimated, I believe Congresswoman talked about this, for as a city, at minimum $200 million of an economic impact just from that 3 months of being occupied. And we know this is going to impede us for months and years to come. And I also want to be quite frank, because of the prior mismanagement of the city's resources, we were already fragile in terms of our economic position. So this is what's in front of us, and I want to be quite frank. There is going to be the proposition to you all as regular working class folks to buy into austerity. And we're already seeing that be waged at the state level of now a conversation of, are we going to let one of our leading regional hospitals close?
No.
Make sure you hold him accountable to that. But are we going to let one of our public institution close, which is something that Trump would love to see? They want to see us close public services, see people be displaced from their homes. They want to see that happen, and we'll see that as a victory of what they did here. And what we've been trying to do at the local level, instead of saying, no, we have to succumb to austerity by eliminating jobs, closing critical city services, eliminating public institutions like our hospitals and things of that nature, let's actually prioritize an equitable recovery. And let's start with the most vulnerable residents. And that means stabilizing people's housing. So we were the first municipality to move $1 million in rental assistance. And I know that's not much because our residents raised at least $15 million out their own pockets, putting it on their credit cards, taking out their savings account, taking away from tuition accounts for their babies to keep their neighbors housed. And that million just this last week inspired a philanthropic leader to say he's going to donate up to $16 million in rental assistance. And he matched additional $3 million that my office led on, bringing the city's total allocation to rental assistance to about $6.8 million. And we also prioritize business assistance. Everyone has named, we've seen businesses in our cultural corridors lose between 70 to 100% of their revenue, just lose it completely. Many of them are facing the reality of having to close. So we moved $7 million for small business assistance, and we just approved those dollars to get out the door last Thursday. So we have been talking about an economic recovery package, and also accompanying that with needed policies, as Representative Frazier highlighted. Something that my office led on was something called Pause Eviction Save Lives, because as we highlighted, we know thousands of residents were afraid, justifiably, to leave their homes because they would risk getting detained or, if not killed, in order just to earn their living. So many people sheltered in place. That meant they lost money, and landlords still expect to get paid at the first of every month. And we know many of our residents do not have it. Our state leaders are moving rental assistance at right now $40 million package, but if those dollars are passed, they won't be unlocked until July. So what do that mean for regular folks for April, for May, for June, for July? And are we essentially intentionally walking into an eviction crisis? So this policy was meant to give people additional time to get access to rental assistance before a landlord can file eviction notice on them. So doing eviction prevention. It wasn't waiving rents or anything of that nature. And fortunately, we was able to pass it, but then our mayor, Jacob Fry, vetoed that policy. And then we weren't able to overcome that veto. So right now, that policy is not in place, but I'm so glad that my colleagues are bulldogs and we don't let up for our people. And the same day that we didn't overcome that veto, another council member introduced the same policy, and we're going to run it back. I also advocated for an eviction moratorium for Governor Walz of like, we did it in 2020. We saw COVID was a deadly virus. Federal agents are deadly viruses in our communities. And why would we not put preventative measures in place that's already being affirmed? People are not leaving their homes and making people having to choose between keeping a roof over their heads or going out and completely being detained and shipped to another state and put in horrible, deplorable conditions. Why would we make regular people who help our state be great, who are helping us be a beacon of inspiration, why would we put them in that position? And unfortunately, we didn't see that moratorium move in place. So again, we're still moving forward on tenant protections in spite of some leaders wavering and moving what actually makes sense to stabilize our communities. And so you will see that from our office, a lot of pushing to invest in our local resources, keeping people housed, making sure people have increased minimum wages. And you're going to hear a lot of, instead of doing that, maybe we should invest $40 million in a police facility, or we should invest money in building a new arena downtown. Or, I mean, the Timberwolves are cool, but like, come on now. That is literally the propositions you're going to see us debate as how we help navigate this time of financial peril. So please make sure you stay attuned to us and say, like, that is not the direction that we want to move towards. And also, I'm also going to be advancing a tax on the rich. Hopefully, you probably won't be here for this, but but we also know if we're talking about bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars, it's not going to. The best way is not asking you to go back into your pockets that were already tight to front that. We need the most wealthiest who have benefited by the Trump or from the Trump administration, seeing the largest transfer of wealth into the wealthiest businesses and households in our country. They should be putting that money back into their local economies, local cities, local communities. So we are going to be advocating for that redistribution. We wouldn't have to worry about lobbying y'all for money to save a hospital if we had a 1% income tax among some of the highest earners. We could have had that revenue coming in. So those are things that I'm going to be advocating for at the local level. Rich people, I need you to run some checks. That's basically
Run some checks, please.
Thank you, Councilmember
There's that one
Wamsley.
guy.
Next,
The
I
one
will
guy
have
who's
Representative
contributing
Frazier.
Wilson.
Comments on
Michael
that.
Wilson.
That's a good dude.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll be quick. I know people want to get to this pizza. And so we did actually. So the Senate. So for folks that don't follow, we are a tied body in the House. That means there are 67 Republicans, 67 Democrats in the House. We have a power sharing agreement. So we share the gavels in all of our committees, and we need to have 68 votes in order to move anything off the House floor. And we also have to have bipartisan agreement to move it out of committees to actually get it to the floor. In the Senate, they have a 1-vote majority. Democrats have a majority. They did pass a bill off the Senate floor and sent it over to us for housing incentives, $40 million. Mm-hmm. Democrats, we did some procedural maneuvers. We got it. We tried to bring it up for a vote. Every Republican voted against it. So we're still having that debate. But that's what you need to know. Watch who is supporting taking care of people that were harmed by this versus those that are not. So when we're going into these midterm elections, everybody's on the ballot here in the state of Minnesota. Make sure that you are looking at the candidates at the state level. Make sure you are looking at those candidates that are encompassing your values and that want to help people in dire times, that want to take care of people that need resources and want to take care of those that are most vulnerable. That is the power that you have as voters, and make sure you're getting those people into office. As the co-chair of Ways and Means, because we're looking at the state budget, we are looking everywhere we can. It's like looking at the cushions, looking at the couch cushions. We're looking everywhere we can for money that we can put towards these things that we know people need, especially our most vulnerable people. Congresswoman Ilhan, she was absolutely right when she said it's not a budget year, which makes it even harder for us because it's not a budget year. It means in a budget year, we have to balance the budget. We have to set items up for appropriation or we'll have a government shutdown. We don't have that pressure this year. So it really is the pressure of all of you all to continue to push us at the state level to do something for those that need it the most. And it does work. People do hear it, right? It's going to be a supplemental budget because we don't have the pressure of actually doing anything constitutional wise. But we do have money. We do have money. And the one thing I want to tell you, so we had a recent forecast, and that forecast was better than expected. That forecast was better than expected because of folks gaining income on non-wage salaries. That means they weren't working. That means investments, stocks, those are the kind of things. Those are people with wealth, with money. So when she talked about that wealth tax, we are looking at all those things. What I can tell you is unlikely that we're going to get it done because Republicans don't agree with that. Some Democrats don't agree with that. Mm-hmm. But it is something that we're looking at. And I will say, I've talked to some people that have some wealth. They're okay with spending a little bit more. They're okay with giving a little bit more. They do understand what it means and what the impact will be on their communities if they did that. We just need more of those folks. So I'll leave it there.
I'm not gonna be the one separating you from the pizza. So thank you all for being concerned about all these critical issues. Sometimes we think the answers for a better society lie in what elected officials are going to do. We don't always think that, but sometimes we think that. And if the last 5 years has proven anything, it is the power of the people. It was always the people. It's still the people now. And really, these elected officials are just people who you sent to represent you in various aspects of life. But fundamentally, it's about us. And change is driven by the things we do every day, like having this meeting, protesting last Saturday. Who was there? Anybody? Thank y'all for coming. And so let's do a bunch more forums like this one between now and the election for sure. Let's make sure that everybody on campus shows up. Let's try to engage the arts community. Let's do everything we can to have a new birth of freedom for active citizenship in this country and for the sake of all of us. Thank y'all.